Chatting this morning, and let me say it again, with Michael Annisette, who is the General Secretary of the National Trade Union Center, about Labor Day activities in Tobago and the no confidence motion against the Prime Minister. Good morning and welcome to you.
Pleasant morning to you and Tobago. Blessings.
Thank you.
Tobago.
Good to have you in Tobago. I know it was almost
my pleasure.
You had to be here. Let's talk a little bit about the Labor Day activities and celebrations in Tobago. We were locked down for 2 years, and then you saw an increase. There was somewhat of an increase, would you say, in terms of the type of support that you saw coming out from Tobago/Trinidad?
Yeah. We definitely, and I want to compliment all the unions and the Guild of Cipriani College, the disability representative, and all those who participated, PSA, Siemens Union, NUGFW, Transport and Industrial Workers Union, Postal Workers Union. We had a cross section of our workers who came out in their numbers, and in terms of Tobago, the crowd was very awesome in our humble view.
All right, so let's ramp things up now. We're looking here at the union's call for PM Rowley's resignation. We've been back and forth with 2%. Unions say no. Yeah. Then we look at 6%. Was it 6%? 4%. Unions say
6 years.
Over 6 years. Unions still say no, not good enough. Yet you're calling. The Prime Minister says, this is going to cost over $5 billion. Cost the government $5. And I see you laughing here already. Cost the government $5 billion. If it goes over. What is acceptable for the unions?
No, well, it is clear that we are living in a situation where workers have not received wage increases going back as far as 2008. And where we had increases negotiated, the government failed to implement it. And I want to make special mention to that, if I'm allowed, in terms of the Port of Scarborough is involved in it too, where we had negotiated legitimately, where the management and the union sat down, because we are the recognized union and the Port Authority management is recognizing now as the employer, and we negotiated a 12% wage increase for 2014 to 2017 for port workers. Having said that, I want to make the point to the public that the Port Authority do not rely on the government to subsidize their wages. We make sufficient revenues to pay our wages out of our revenues. And therefore, the question is, why it is that the government, since 2015, have refused, to give the instructions to the management to pay port workers their legitimate 12% wage increase. And there's a fundamental issue. And the same thing happened with NIB workers, where there was an agreement, and the Minister of Finance refuses to date to authorize the payment of the 9% wage increase. So then the issue, and I want to make that clear to the general public here, that this question of the Ukraine crisis didn't happen 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, So we are not going to buy into that. And we are also saying that we have witnessed this government spending money with the financiers, the political elites, and the business elites, and they find money. They call it all kinds of nice names, incentives and everything. But when it comes to workers, to pay workers' salary and wages, which is a productive payment. And why I am saying that is because workers spend their money on goods and services, unlike those rich people. And if you fail to give workers that ability to buy the goods and service, that to pay for it rather, in a situation where it is climbing, exponentially every day, what you are doing, you are stagnating workers' ability to survive in their society. And we are saying within the trade union movement, that must not happen in Trinidad and Tobago. The government finds money to pay everything, find money to pay workers if you have to find the money. Because when you pay workers, monies based on the income level, you start off with a 25% deduction already in terms of tax and other issues in terms of value-added tax and NIS tax and all. People don't understand that. So we are not going to buy into that narrative that the government is pushing more through the Prime Minister. And one stage he made a threat that if I pay, I will have to send workers home.
Yes.
Is that the role of a Prime Minister? That is how you talk. Is that the reality? That is not the reality. The issue is the government fiscal policy speaks to downgrading wages, stagnating wages, where we have a situation where people can hardly live. They live from salary to salary, and we say we cannot continue along those lines. And the 4% wage increase over a 6-year period, all right, and the government insensitivity in the context that they fail to recognize that with their proposals, they are telling pensioners who would have worked for this government, who would have left their industry and had a legitimate expectation for increases, you are telling them no increases for them. Is that fair? Because the issue is about fairness, the issue is about social justice, and the issue is that workers in Trinidad are Trinidadians and Tobagonians too. And it's not, and Trinidad and Tobago is for all of us. It's not for a special group of people. That is the issue. And
I hear you loud and clear. And there are those who would say, but over the last 2 years, there was a pandemic that the country, I mean, it hit not only Trinidad and Tobago, but the world hit pretty hard. And there was some maybe unforeseen circumstances. Don't you, what would you say to that in terms of?
What I will say to that, if we were asking for a wage increase, you remember government proposal was for 2% over a 8-year period, you know. So the pandemic wasn't 8 years ago, you know. And people fail to realize that, and you have to ask yourself the question, why it is that the government would have failed to implement the port agreement and NIS, and why it is that this government, who knows that each day they fail to sit down and negotiate with the unions that they will have an increase in cost in terms of back pay and all the other things. It's not the workers. The proposal was submitted on time to the government, and they refused to negotiate. That is the issue.
Let's just pause for a course here. We've got to continue our discussion this morning with Mr. Michael Annisette on the issue here of the Labor Day activities and the no confidence motion against the Prime Minister. Now, just before we went over to Tobago Notes, I know you were speaking to the issue of the 2%, 4%, and the government being in a position to do better, that the pandemic did not, and the pandemic was a recent factor. However, what we're talking about is outstanding increments for a period of time before that.
Remunerations, salaries and wages that workers and pensioners deserve as government employees. And I want to make a fundamental point that people are not paying attention to. Are we aware in Trinidad and Tobago that the private sector, notwithstanding all that we are hearing about recessionary periods, we're hearing about the pandemic, these things happen, but they were able to pay their employees' wage increases over the period of time leading up and going beyond the pandemic. And that's a reality. Now you have to ask yourself the question, if the private sector can pay it, how come that the government is now claiming inability to pay when they would have contributed to the delay in negotiating wages and salaries on behalf of government employees? And I want to make that point. There's a distinction between the government as a government and the responsibility as a government as an employee that is enshrined in the ILO convention as it relates to collective bargaining. And they fail to honor their commitment, and therefore you cannot now put the burden on the workers by asking workers to accept wage increases that does not upgrade their standard of living. That is the issue that we have to discuss.
And for this reason, the unions are calling for the Prime Minister.
Yeah, among several other things. Because it's not the Prime Minister, we are calling on the Rowley Led-Administration. There's a no vote confidence, because we in the trade union movement, and every worker, if you talk to, they are fed up. They are concerned about the arrogance that has been displayed by this government. They are concerned over the policies of this government to undermine and marginalize the trade union movement, and by extension, the workers of Trinidad and Tobago, the people in the pensioners, the single parents from MTS and all these other companies who have to live from day to day. There are policemen that I'm aware of have to do 2 jobs in order to make ends meet, and they were outside there in the pandemic. And let me talk about the pandemic. Who was outside there? I didn't see the Prime Minister. I didn't see the Minister of Finance. I saw dock workers. I saw nurses. I saw healthcare workers. I saw doctors. I saw MTS workers, PTSC workers. Okay. I saw workers from TNTech, from WASAP. The rated workers cleaning the streets. They faced the pandemic and they were exposed to bringing that COVID-19 pandemic and sickness and carry it home to their children and their wives. That is a reality, and we are not paying attention to that. Other countries would have recognized that and give those workers increases. Okay, I know it have regional health authority workers who are working there on contracts as I speak to you, and you know what is amazing? The nurses that they took on during the pandemic, you know, they want to let them go and bring new people to replace them. Is that a sensitive government? Are they serious about how they treat people as human beings? And the treatment has been inhumane. This government took a decision not to place any workers on any boards where there is no legal requirement to place workers on the board. All other governments would have placed labor representatives, and they have failed to do that. So you will understand when we say we have all the evidence to demonstrate that this government is anti-people and when I say people, working class, the poor, the disadvantaged, not the big boys and them, because we don't want to chill with them. Okay? That is clear, and it cannot be denied, because we are compiling a whole levels of issues that will demonstrate that what we are saying is correct. If you can't say you care about people verbally, you must be able to demonstrate it. Walk the walk and talk the talk. Not just talk and demonstrate it tangibly that you really care about people and you judge people, not by what they say. As our African foreparents tell us, you judge them by what they do.
All right. What is the union's call, moving forward here, what is the union's call to public servants? What is the current call?
Well, tomorrow, we want to thank the public servants for coming out in the thousands on the 27th of May. It was one of the biggest expressions of rebellion and concern, because this struggle is about the future for our children. It's what kind of Trinidad and Tobago we want for the majority of people in Trinidad and Tobago. It's not only the wages. I want people to understand that wages is critical, because money dictates everything. If you don't have money, how do you pay your taxes? If you don't have money, how do you pay your rent? If you don't have money, how do you go in the grocery and buy goods and services? If you don't have money, how do you pay your mortgage bill? So, in other words, wages is a fundamental ingredient in the context of economics. And you cannot have economics if you don't have people. And forget about all those big economists from university who I am told is telling government, do not raise the deficit spending. Every country would have gone through that. And America, during the pandemic period, you know what Biden did? He raised the minimum wage, because he recognized that in order for the economy to grow, that people must have real wages in their hands, because without that, what happens to the aggregate demand that is required to keep your economy growing? Wages and living wages is a fundamental macroeconomic policy that speaks to consuming the goods and services that is necessary to keep an economy going.
Okay. So what, moving forward, what is the call? What is the call to the public sector?
The call for the public sector is to stay strong, is to stay firm. Because this struggle is a just struggle. This struggle will determine your survival. This struggle will determine whether you can put a proper plate of food on the table for your children, which is your responsibility. This struggle is about whether you'll be able to afford a home or a shelter over your head and your children. This is what this is all about. This is about a better Trinidad and Tobago. And if we cannot, as an organization, if we cannot, as we could work towards building a better Trinidad and Tobago and a better future for me as a worker and my children, what is the purpose of I'm working there for? What is the purpose of being part of this society? Right? Is it that our rights stops after we vote for a party? That is the question. And we need to start those kinds of conversation in order for us to move forward as a people and as a society. And we are saying, which is the Joint Trade Union Movement, the NATUC, and I'm fighting. Under the banner Unite to Fight, we are saying enough is enough, enough is enough. And you must respect workers and pay them what is rightfully their own.
What they are worth. Most definitely. We hear you loud and clear this morning, Mr. Annisette. I want to thank you for being with us this morning. And the discussion continues. We're going to be following that discussion, viewers, to see where things go. And certainly the unions are not letting go of their stance, their policy, their position. All right, they are not letting go. And they're not just fighting for themselves. They're fighting for
a better Trinidad.
That's right, a better Trinidad and Tobago. All right, so thank you again for being on the program with us this morning.
The pleasure is mine and blessings, and we continue to go to our ancestral mothers and fathers and ask them for the guidance and call on our divine master to guide us as we continue this struggle for freedom, justice, social justice, and the right to be respected and the right to have living wages. Thank you, Tobago. I love you, and stay strong, workers. We shall overcome.